Memory is an important aspect of what makes humans unique. In this lesson, you will learn about memory and how it helps us process information. Can you remember the first day at school? How about what you ate for dinner yesterday? Why do some memories seem solid and reliable, while other memories are foggy? Studies in memory are important because our memory shapes the people we are and the person we become. Psychologists often study how memory works in order to understand ways to improve memory and help those with memory disorders. Many psychologists define memory as learning that has persisted over time, leading to a somewhat permanent change in knowledge. In a basic sense, memory works like a computer flash drive in three ways. To help you think about memory in concrete terms, psychologists have devised a system for dividing it into three processes. The first one is encoding, second one is storage, and the last one is retrieval. Compare your brain to a computer. We first encode and store information on a flash drive, and then we retrieve that information later, like we do when we pull up a file for an assignment. The first process that your brain performs when it gets new information is encoding. In order to remember something, we must first encode that information. Encoding is how we process incoming messages. We first encode information coming in through our senses as long as we are paying attention to those messages. This is known as sensory memory, which is the shortest element of memory and lasts under 1 second. We cannot encode what we do not pay attention to, and in that way, our memories are fallible. Our focus is limited, so we miss many messages that do not need our attention. Can you describe every details of a banknote? Even though you have seen a banknote many times in your life, you will likely miss much of the details because you did not encode the information. Since your brain can do things that no computer can do, you may encode the information of an image or a word in the way that is meaningful to you. By associating things that you want to remember with your experience or things that are meaningful to you, you make it easier to organize that information. These are ways that you encode information in your brain for storage. Once the information is successfully encoded, it becomes part of either our short-term or long-term memory. Storage refers to maintaining information over time. Once information is encoded, it can be stored. Your short-term memories hold small amounts of information for a very short time. Retrieval is the ability to access information when you need it. If you meet someone for the first time at a party, you need to encode her name, for example, Lisa. While you associate her name with her face, then you need to maintain the information over time. If you see her a week later, you need to recognize her face and have it serve as a cue to retrieve her name. Any successful act of remembering requires those all three processes. Human brain is an amazing organ that can do so many things. The brain is in control of body movements, thoughts, and is the place where many memories are stored. Memory is our ability to encode, store, retain, and subsequently record information and past experience in human brain. Human memory is a complex process that defines each individual. There are three main types of human memory: sensory memory, short-term or working memory, and long-term memory. Sensory memory is the shortest element of memory and lasts under 1 second. This memory allows the brain to keep specific information which involves the sense after original information is experienced. Sensory memory uses 5 senses to help us remember sights, sounds, smells, textures, and tastes. There are two main types of sensory memory, which are iconic and echoic. Iconic memory is also called visual memory, and it is when you can picture an image for a split second after it has disappeared. Iconic memory is how the brain remembers an image you have seen in the world around you. For example, look at an object in the room where you are right now and then close your eyes and visualize that object. The image you see in your mind is your iconic memory. This is an example of the way your iconic memory works. Even after the picture of the object has removed, an image of it remains in your head for a second. Your sensory memory constructs the image where it doesn't actually exist. Another example, you wake up at night and try to get a glass of water and then you turn on the light in the kitchen. Almost instantly, the bulb burns out and leaves you in the darkness, but you can briefly envision what the room looked like. The other example, you glance over at your friend's phone as she is scrolling through her Facebook newsfeed. You spot something as she quickly thumbs past it, but you can close your eyes and visualize an image of the item very briefly. Echoic memory is similar, but instead of remembering images, you hear sounds for a split second. After the sound stops, the process of echoic memory is automatic. This means audio information enters your echoic memory, even if you don't purposely try to listen. In fact, your mind is constantly forming echoic memories. Spoken language is a common example of echoic memory. When someone talks to you while you're busy, you might not fully hear what they say. If they repeat what they say, it will sound familiar because your echoic memory heard them the first time. Another example in daily life is when you listen to a music, your brain uses echoic memory when you listen to music. It briefly recalls the previous notes and connects it to the next one. As a result, your brain recognizes the notes as a song. Echoic memory is very short, but it holds information longer than echoic memory. Research studies show that echoic memory is much shorter. It lasts for less than half a second, while echoic memory lasts for 2 to 4 seconds, and the brain needs more time to store audio information. Most of the information that gets into sensory memory is forgotten, but information that we turn our attention to with the goal of remembering it may pass into short-term memory. To transfer information from your sensory memory to your short-term memory, you have to practice or rehearse it. Short-term memory, or STM, is the place where small amounts of information can be temporarily kept for more than a few seconds, but usually for less than 1 minute. Short-term memory is information that is held briefly and then is forgotten. Information in short-term memory is not stored permanently, but rather becomes available for us to process. Today, psychologists refer a short-term memory as working memory because it is believed that this type of memory involves more active level of processing than just catching incoming signals. Working memory can be referred to information that is stored briefly while being encoded, and it can also be referred to information that we retrieve from long-term memory. For example, if we hear a new phone number that we need to call, our working memory holds that number briefly while we dial the number, but typically that new number does not make it into our long-term memory. We don't usually walk around thinking of our best friend's phone number, but if it's stored in our long-term memory, we can bring that information into our working memory when we need it. Both examples highlight the active processing involved in working memory. The capacity of working memories varies per individual, but psychologists believe that the human mind is capable of holding 7 objects plus or minus 2 in our short-term memory. George Miller published the study under the title The Magical Number 7 plus or minus 2. Based on his research, he showed that human working memory can store about 7 things. His study provides evidence that most adults can store between 5 and 9 items in their short-term memory because it has a limited number of slots that the information could be stored. Once you get beyond 9 items, it gets much harder and people start making lots of errors. This is where we get the magical number 7 plus or minus 2. He also explained that there is a possibility that this limit could be extended by the process of chunking. Chunking breaks up long strings of information into units or chunks. The principle of chunking or organizing a bigger string of new information into smaller chunks. Chunking is easier to commit to working memory than the longer string of information. It can potentially increase the number of individual items that our short-term memories can recall at any given time. A chunk could refer to digits, words, sounds, or people's faces. For example, grouping a single-digit numbers into groups of 3 is chunking. A typical phone number is roughly the extent of our capacity. We can improve our storage capacity by chunking or grouping information into meaningful units. If we only had sensory memories and short-term memories, we would never remember anything at all. Fortunately, we have a long-term memory as well. There are several types of long-term memory. Long-term memory can be further divided into decorative and non-decorative memory. A memory that you can clearly picture into your head is called decorative. Another word for this type of clear memory is explicit. An explicit memory is anything you have to think about in order to remember. Decorative memory corresponds to information that could be declared and consciously remembered or recalled. There are 2 types of decorative memory, episodic and semantics memory. Episodic memory contains information based on specific events or episodes that have occurred throughout life, and they are often associated with personal history and life events. Examples of this kind of decorative memory include the first day at school, a song you heard at a school when you were a kid, the movie you saw on your first date, the first time you travel by airplane. On the other hand, semantics memory helps you remember information and concepts. It is the recollection of facts, and it is closely associated with knowledge. Some examples of semantic memories are understanding the difference between a bird and a cat, knowing that glass is green, knowing who the Prime Minister is in the year 2021, knowing how to use the iPhone. Of course, not all memories are explicit. The other type of memory is non-decorative. Another word for this type of memory is implicit memories. There are memories that are unconscious. Procedural memory is a kind of non-decorative memory. This kind of memory is often denoted as muscle memory or body memory. Examples of procedural memory include playing the piano or driving a car, since it requires skill and very specific bodily movements. Ultimately, procedural memories allow us to complete tasks or motor action without being conscious of the effort. This is contrast with decorative memory, which requires active conscious effort. Procedural memory information cannot be declared or consciously recalled. Another good example of procedural memory is the ability to type out words on the computer keyboard without looking down at the keyboard, since the fingers remember where the letters are. There are many ways to improve your long-term memory. For example, a technique of mnemonic. It is a learning technique that helps us to remember information. Mnemonics are used in the form of memorable words, phrases, poems, etc. Here is an example of mnemonic device that can help you remember the names of the 5 oceans. Another technique for remembering things is to create acronyms, which is a form of abbreviation where a word is formed from the first letters of the series of the words. Some common examples of acronyms include AKA, for also known as, and FYI, for your information. Mnemonic can be a word, phrase, poem, or even a song. Acronym is pronounced as a single word. Please note that mnemonic can take a form of an acronym as well. For example, fanboys 47 coordinating conjunctions for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Self-referencing or relating information to yourself can also help you remember. Rehearsal can help you keep information in short-term or working memory long enough for it to be transferred to long-term memory. Spaced repetition, which is a technique that involves relearning material at increasing widely spaced intervals. German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus identified a technique called spaced repetition. For example, suppose you are studying Chinese vocabulary words for an upcoming test. You begin studying the word on Monday evening, you review them Tuesday evening, then you wait until Thursday evening to look at them again, and then you study them again on Sunday evening before taking your exam on next next Monday. This is spaced repetition. You increase the interval between repetitions by one evening with each repetition. Repeatedly studying like this also illustrates overlearning or continuing to study even after you think you have already mastered the material. Each of these techniques can help our working memory move information into long-term memory so that it may be retrieved with less effort when we need it.